for joining today. My presentation is going to be focusing on behavioral health in the classroom. My name is Casey Torres, and this concept strikes close to home for me. I grew up with my sister being diagnosed as bipolar in her adolescent years. I later found out that my mom and dad were both diagnosed as adults during that same time. I was never taken for screening because there were no signs to worry my parents. I did, however, get tested as being gifted and was put into a lot of accelerated classes to keep me busy later on that same year. The idea is there are different signs to look for in our students' day-to-day behavior. The idea of behavioral health is important for me because mental health is just as vital to a child's life as their physical health. Imagine if there was a mental check every year that was needed, like we ask for when we get physicals, when we take our child to the doctors. No one asks about our mental health unless it's to the point where it's hard not to see in a child that's acting out, or ourselves. In our everyday lives, if we look at a child and see them with a bruise, we'll stop and ask them how it got there. As for if we see them sad, we may ask them if they're okay, and they'll respond yeah, and we'll move on with our lives. As for the bruise, we may further question it depending on what it looks like in the location and if it was there the day before. Starting off, the big picture. Does anyone know what it means to be diagnosed with a mental or behavioral health disorder? We think about getting physicals every year for our bodies. A lot of school activities require this. But what about our brains? We need to be taking care of this as well. The brain is just as important as our body. Sadly, it is becoming more common for children to be diagnosed with a mental health disorder. According to the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry in 1997, they gave a practice approval for bipolar disorders in children that were being diagnosed with a bipolar disorder. Looking at you guys in the audience as educators, we should want to know more about this. How can you prepare yourself for this issue if there's no initiation for this issue? How do you know if there is something missing in your curriculum if no one mentions it? Here it is. There is a lack of educational training to detect behavioral and emotional disorders in children. The idea that children are being diagnosed with such issues that were only found in adults should intrigue us to get a full understanding. How can we help children early on? According to Berzin in 2011, the most common area of needing service is detected in the school system. If this is happening regularly, there needs to be an action put into place, and that is exactly what this presentation is for. I want to furtherly open your mind and give you the problems and possible solutions for this to help the students succeed in life, for the students of now are our leaders of tomorrow. Here are some facts to fill you in on the idea of behavioral health and the connection between our students. 12 to 22% of students have been diagnosed with a behavioral health issue, according to Berzin in 2011. Early signs of issues start in childhood, and if not helped with now, can worsen into adulthood and extend over generations to come. Another fact that I personally think is important is that if we can see teachers as the first mental health provider for the student, imagine what we can do with that. What you will hear me say throughout this presentation, this is the fact that my whole presentation is based around, is you, the teachers, our educators. We are here today because there is an issue between the classroom and the educators. This is not to blame one side or the other. The best reminder is that there is a lack of talk around the matter, and I want to get everyone talking. There isn't something missing, but something that can be improved on. To teach everyone about behavioral and mental health would take longer than I have for this presentation, and believe me, I could go on forever to discuss children's mental health and all of the ins and outs of it. The important things are that there are many different first signs when diagnosing a child. Sometimes there is nothing there to diagnose, and that's okay too, but we don't want to miss any steps in the process. The biggest thing we hear is when a family is doing an intake at a behavioral health center is that their child acts out a lot in the classroom, and they get constant calls and papers sent home about their child's disruption in class. This problem right here is what I want us as a whole to fix. Sometimes, depending on the diagnosis, the child needs a different way of learning, or the child is on the spectrum and may need a sensory item to hold on to so they can put their full focus on the teacher. At least learning a little about this world is one step closer to understanding it. We will go over in more detail what I have in mind for this to occur. What I can tell you now is that there needs to be some system put into place to learn about the behavioral health world, such as yearly trainings. One of the items I want to share with you and state out is to remind yourself why you became a teacher. We want to see the students grow. We want to educate them. And most importantly, we want the students to succeed, not only in our classroom, but in the world. Of course, you may have other reasons, and that's perfectly okay. But this is just a list of few that I have heard from teachers when I asked the question myself. Before moving on, I want to tell you guys the key to success, and that is keep educating yourself. This is a very important key to keep in mind. This is what will make teaching education that much more rewarding. Teachers do not know everything there is to know about education, and I wish we could all say that each one of you do, but children, especially young children, think this fact is true. Moving forward, what do you personally know about the behavioral health world off the top of your head? Have you heard about it from someone, or maybe know someone who was diagnosed with a hyperactivity disorder, or split personalities, or is on the autism spectrum? Have you seen a student disrupt the class multiple times after a certain incident may have taken place? The first thought may be that this student is bored or isn't getting enough attention at home. So where else are they going to seek it? In your classroom. What if it was something worse and you ignored it? This isn't to blame you or overthink about each student you have had in the past, but to open your mind to the idea of now, that this could be something different and just a child acting out due to being bored or wanting the classroom's attention isn't always the first case scenario. So far, can anyone tell me early signs that may occur showing that the child may have a behavioral health issue? It could be as simple as a child not being able to sit still, or it could be a child who overreacts to someone taking the colored pencil that was next to them that they were not done using. The common phrase for these events is, "Oh, they're just acting their age," or "She doesn't understand fully what sharing means yet." This is not always true. The student can know the concept, but are missing those key reactors in their brain to act appropriately. In the scenario about the child taking the colored pencil, yes, it could be on the table amongst the other colored pencils, and that student goes to grab it, but that one student that was using it and put it down because they needed to use one other color to finish, in their minds they see, I'm still using it. It's mine. It's still in my area of precision. And once that student takes it, they get so fixated on it that that's all they can worry about. That's all they can think of. And that's not because they can't share. Like I mentioned, there's just reactors, sensors in their minds that they're still trying to put together. And that's what they need help working on. Looking at actions that are already in place or have been tried out are these that I'm going to tell you. Focusing on school psychologists to be the solution and focusing on school social workers to detect the issue and take care of it. In an everyday classroom setting, there are no psychologists or social workers sitting in a classroom and seeing everyday behaviors from each of the students. We would need a lot more of these experts to be available to sit in the classroom every single day. That would also cost the school a lot more money than that is not there. The idea of this is great, but there are holes missing in this. If this was in place, we would use these two people to help the students moving forward. But my focus is on detecting the child that needs the help. My goal is that in the classroom, the teacher can have an understanding what to look for and know the next steps for this student so they can be successful, such as reaching out to the student's parent, telling them what's going on, and giving them the resources for next steps, which would be scheduling an intake at a behavioral health center so they can furtherly and correctly diagnose the student. Another way that has been introduced is the assistant health program. This program would train others to help students in a group setting with these assistants. The process would be these teachers would make notes of the students that would act out, let the school multidisciplinary team choose students, and let the assistants detect if there needs to be further steps for this child or dismiss that there is nothing wrong with them at all. Again, this idea is not bad, but there are extra steps being put into place. And again, there's an action that the school would need to bring in more outside people to fulfill this program. In any program for a school, we have to think about the budget. The education system does not have all the funding we all wish it had to help students succeed and reach their full potential, especially if we're thinking of public schools. We have to make do with what we get and make the best out of it. That is kind of like this. We need to think efficient and smart. So the start of this program would start with you, the teachers. You're the ones we want to start with because we believe that you get the first look on each child in the classroom, as well as the opportunity to spend the most time with these students as well. I want this whole process to start with you. You guys get to be the kickstart to the whole thing, to change a student's life for the better. The idea I want to put into place is training the teachers. Teachers are around their students the most, even more than the students' parents. The classroom setting covers such a great chunk of time that we can see why this might be the place a child will start showing concerning signs early on. I remember being in grade school and looking back at it now, teachers teach us a lot, more than just the basics of education. Yes, we learn our ABCs and early math, but we also learn behavioral skills from you guys, such as listening to others, sitting in our seat properly, and how to raise our hands to ask questions. We also learn that teachers are always promoting development such as social skills and behavioral skills, and trying to reduce obscure behaviors. That is why teachers can be seen as the first mental health provider for a child. There should be a training for new teachers coming in each year, and that would have to start in obviously college, but that's a different thing to get into. But also, moving forward, having refreshers offered each year for you guys of the new school year, and also maybe having follow-ups halfway through the year. When thinking about the other two ideas that I previously mentioned and that were already being put into place in other places, the one I have is the easiest and most cost-effective, I think. Starting out, you can bring in one person to educate everyone in the school, but as time goes on, one person from the school can be taught more in detail and become the instructor for the trainings. Now, let's take time to think about each person involved with this issue and how the solution can benefit them. First off, being the parents. Looking at this view through a parent, they trust their children's well-being with educators whose purpose in life are to help their students be successful and move on to the next steps in their own personal lives. How can they help their child move forward if they do not know or understand the little bumps in the road that can occur on the way? There are benefits for them as well through this process. Not to say that a lot of the responsibility gets put on the teachers, but it really does. We don't expect you guys just to take our children for 8 hours a day and bring them back home. We expect you guys to teach them things, to learn things, to be ready to grow for the next year, for that next grade of them moving up. We expect a lot from teachers, especially from a parent's point of view. They put their child's life in the teacher's hands every day. Another way to look at this is that parents are not going to feel they need to educate themselves on behavioral health unless they find out their child may need services. But how will that happen if no one mentions the idea or that option? Once it gets to the point that they are going to want to talk with someone to understand what it means, and a teacher is usually the first point of contact, at least in my experience so far. If you, the teacher, at least knows the basics, we can help point the parents in the right direction for who next to contact and best steps moving forward for their child. Would you know at first glance if one of these students on the screen has a behavioral health disorder? I cannot say if any of them do or do not, but you would not be able to tell at first glance. Being diagnosed with a behavioral health disorder is not something you physically see. it's mentally. We would need to get to know a little more about each one of these students to diagnose them. This whole concept is because of the students. The students are my number one concern. We want to help them be prepared in life. And this situation that they are going to go through is going to be hard. At least if each teacher they will encounter understands the basics of what they're going through, it might just make it that much better for them to understand what is going on, what to expect moving forward in their life, and knowing that they're not alone and it's okay to accept who they are. The children who are in behavioral health world are not different from other students. They just have more qualities to them. Again, each case is different and each diagnosis requires different treatments to help them in the long run. But a positive support system will remain a number one need for each child, no matter what. And of course, I can't forget about you guys, the teachers. The world of education is always changing for the better. We discover new things such as ways to best teach our students. We can see this is another step to helping your students succeed. In previous slides, I mentioned that the world of children being in behavioral health world is growing. And this isn't a good thing, but we have to accept it. And since it is growing, more people need to be aware of the issue and understand it better. That is exactly what we're doing here today, learning what the world of behavioral health is and what it means for a child who is entering it and going through it. Again, you get to have the feeling of power to help others. In this case, help your students even more on a higher level. We have come to the end of my presentation, and I do not want to leave your minds frazzled with all of this information I am putting on you guys. So let's go over some questions that may come up. Is this a lot of information I have given you in such a short time? Yes, yes it is. But all of it is important. All of it matters. And all of it is great information to retain. Does it all make sense right now to you? Probably not. I gave you guys a lot and a lot of things I want to make happen, but that's okay. This is the part where you keep pushing forward to find out more for information. Keep asking those questions. Find out more. Do your own personal research. Will you continue to think about what we went over today? This is what I truly hope you guys will. My goals for this issue is to shed light on the matter and get more people involved with this issue. Lastly, the next steps. This is where you guys are going to come in and be my helpers. Do something about this issue. Start advocating that there needs to be trainings put into place. Ask other educators around you if they know what the world of behavioral health is and what they are doing for their students. Keep this conversation going. Do not let it end when this presentation does. I can talk and talk until I'm blue in the face to tell you guys how important this is. Not just to me, but to everyone that will be involved in this situation. Thank you, and if you have any questions or concerns, please come find me afterwards so we can discuss this further.